And these ladies too, their dance is no joke too. This lady who was said to be 120 years old, so Remedios said that, and this is what the agreed upon age was. We can't confirm it with, a birth certificate, but this was the general accepted age of this woman is 120. And their dancing is really cool. It's about stomping. So the Maasai it's about how high you can jump.
And the shoulder.
Right? And the shoulders. So the women would do a lot of the shoulder work, and the men would see how high they could jump. And then the Batwa, it was about stomping. And they're known as the Pygmies, like not very large people, but they were shaking the ground with their stomping. And these ladies were doing it. And her daughter was 91 and was also doing the stomping and dancing.
Yes. Yeah. Her daughter, who was not the firstborn, by the way, was 91 years old. And with the Batwa, it's a bit different. You can go by their age a bit more than other communities. See, in many communities like the Maasai and many places around the world, birthdays are not celebrated and they're not recorded. But with the Batwa, they are. They do celebrate birthdays. They are recorded. And this woman had a 91-year-old daughter. She had her sister alive still as well.
Human.
Les humains à leur meilleur.
C'est tu apogeo.
Hello, my friends. It's time for another episode with the wonderful Mary Ruddick on our journey through Africa. This episode, we make it over to Uganda and travel 10 hours to the Bwindi impenetrable forest to visit the Batwa tribe, better known as the Pygmies. This group used to live in the forest and hunt and trap animals and eat all natural foods until 1991 when they were forced off their land by their government. They now have to rely on corn and beans and other crops and are losing their health and their culture. The group we stayed with are mixing in with the other people in the village and are definitely losing their heritage. It was great to visit them while that's still possible. I don't know how many more years they'll be around. You'll definitely want to listen to this one and hear about the 120-year-old great-great-great-grandmother dancing and stopping around with her youngest 91-year-old daughter. We also got to trek in the forest and hang out with the few remaining mountain gorillas, which was another once-in-a-lifetime experience. At the end, we talk about how the modern foods and oils are coming to the cities in Uganda, and it's causing some big problems that are going to be devastating if it continues. Mary and I mention our new organization to help groups like the Pygmy, Maasai, and Chaga that we visited get back to their ancestral diets. It's called Cows for Kids, and we do exactly that. Go to cowsforkids.com with a number 4 and learn more and click through to the Indiegogo page that just launched today. We're putting in our own money to buy cows, goats, pigs, and chickens for these communities, but are opening it up for others to do the same. This is not like a normal nonprofit where there's all kinds of middlemen and administrative stuff. It's just us and you directly buying animals for the specific communities we visited. Mary is going to simply take whatever funds we raise and buy that many animals for each group. She knows many other groups personally who are in need, and we can expand if people support the project. These people are not getting enough nutrition from animal foods, and having a cow and chickens can supply the milk and eggs year-round that will vastly change their health trajectory. What I'm most excited about is seeing the difference between the groups we support and neighboring villages who only have corn flour, oil, and sugar, for example. This is all the Maasai school we visited had for their meals all day. If the community and the world see the differences in health of the kids that get something as simple as milk in their porridge each day compared to those who didn't, maybe people will wake up, change their thinking, and stop dropping off sacks of grains for aid and get some cows instead. Go to cows4kids.com and support the project along with us. You can click through to the Indiegogo campaign there or search for Cows for Kids. Thanks, everyone. We're very excited to get more of the animal foods they wish they had back in their diet. If you want to get some quality animal foods for yourself, there's nosetotale.org, where we ship out boxes straight from our ranch in Texas to your door. We've added great products like biltong, which is a sugar-free and additive-free grass-fed jerky, skincare from beef tallow, which is absolutely amazing, and the awesome seasonings. There's free shipping options as well, and that's at nosetotale.org. Also go to sapien.org for everything else. You can book something with Dr. Gary, join our Sapien program if you're ready to make some significant changes in your health and or want to lose weight, or join the Sapien tribe to get all the bonus content, private Zoom sessions with myself and Dr. Gary, and much more. That's sapien.org. Now, it's time for the show with Mary Ruddick and the Batwa of Uganda. Make sure to watch the video version on the Food Lies YouTube channel for the photos and videos from the trip. You won't want to miss the 120-year-old lady dancing. Here we go. Hello, everyone. We're back with Mary for round 3. How's it going, Mary?
It's going great. Can't wait to talk to you about the Batwa today.
That's awesome. You're still in Cape Town doing your thing. How's it going down there?
I'm loving it in Cape Town. Yeah, it's beautiful and sunny. The mountains are incredible. The ocean is beautiful. It's pretty fantastic here.
I would love to come back. I was looking at flights. Mary said that we have some extra bedrooms. They're 35 hours. It's 35 hours. I can't do it.
No, you've got to come. We've got these extra bedrooms. We can go see the sun together. Keep looking for flights, really.
The sun would be cool. I mean, 35 hours. I mean, it took us only 22 hours to get to Tanzania. So 35 hours doesn't sound good. And going through that whole process all over again, getting in and out of Africa. Either way. Well, let's talk about the Batwa. These are the Pygmies in Uganda.
Yes.
So there's a whole story even getting there. I mean, we had to do the COVID tests and it was a nightmare. We thought we weren't even going to make it. We thought we were going to have to drive to Uganda 17 hours around that big lake, Victoria, I think it is. But we made it. It was interesting. Air Tanzania, you didn't have to wear a mask on the plane.
No.
Very interesting. I liked it.
Yeah.
So let's just start. We got into Uganda. So we had a maskless flight. We got into Entebbe. We had a nice dinner, really nice dinner by the water, and spent the night. Woke up early and had a 10-hour drive.
Yes, a 10-hour drive through Uganda. It is not an easy feat to get to the Batwa, and to get to a lot of these communities, it takes a lot of gumption and a lot of effort. And the Batwa were definitely one of those, because a 10-hour drive across Uganda is pretty significant. And it's not like driving in America or in Europe. There's road curfews. There's no lights on the road. And so once it's dark at sunset, 6 p.m., you can't be on the road anymore. It's illegal. So especially in these kind of rarely used roads, you really have to be done by sunset. So you have to pre-plan everything in advance and know where you're going to be and all of that. So yeah, it was great, but it was the most fun car ride I think I've ever had, because we talked nonstop and had so many ideas. So yeah, I'm just always in for a car ride with you in the future, FYI.
It was fantastic. We realized how many great ideas we had together and how we're going to join our practices and Sapien and Mary's work. And we're going to talk about Cows for Kids, our charitable organization. I guess we can save it a little more for the end. We're just getting the website up. We're going to do Indiegogo, but as it sounds, we're getting Cows for Kids, you know?
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't be more excited about that. I think it's just what is needed.
Yeah, so we'll come back to that one, but especially with the Maasai, we talked about how we visited the school and they didn't have enough food, or really they had just the sad 3 ingredients, sugar, flour, oil, and they didn't have any animal foods to drink with that porridge. So at the very least, we want to just get some cows to this group, and then they can start having milk into that porridge when they're at school, and then we're going to go beyond to other groups that we visited.
That's right. Yes.
Awesome. So back to the Batwa. So we journeyed. There's just all these speed bumps, and instead of actually they did have police with radar guns too. I saw that. Checking your speed. They had little detaining points that we can talk about later. Yes. With a lot of spike strips out, and it was quite a drive, but super fun talking to Mary and Draco and Jay the whole way. And so we finally made it. Stayed at a nice lodge there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really beautiful.
Very beautiful.
It was like a postcard. Yeah. In fact, that's what Jay kept saying, was that Uganda is just as postcard-like as you can get. And the Bwindi Mountains were no different, which is where the Batwa people are from. They're smoky and green and lush and really lovely. So we got to see the sunset there and have a lovely dinner before going to bed. And we went to bed pretty early because we had a very early hike to go see the gorillas the next day.
Yeah, we can start off with the gorillas because that was kind of a bonus, but it's this amazing, one of a kind, life experience that we just happen to be able to do. And it's the Bwindi impenetrable forest, and these are where the last mountain gorillas are remaining. And there's one other group. There's what, 1,000 left?
Yes. Yeah,
How many
about that.
gorillas are left?
I think it's about a
Yeah.
thousand, and they don't live anywhere else. So they only live in this forest. They don't exist in zoos. In fact, they die in captivity. So this is the only place you can go see them. And they have several groups that they track, and they don't guarantee when you can see them. So they gave us the hardest hike because we were the youngest, most fit group.
Mhm.
And with us, we had a Greek TV star, actually, and
Mhm.
who does YouTubing as well as his channel back in Greece, and some other folks. And they gave us the really long hard hike, which the name impenetrable in the title of the forest is not a joke. It's not there as decoration. It's a very impenetrable forest. This path that we were on, you would think no one had been on it for 6 months, and yet people go on it every single day. So it just overgrows very quickly, and it's very muddy, and you're slipping and sliding, and the trail can be very narrow, and it can fall off into a ditch. And then there's elephant footprints, which was my favorite part.
Yeah, that was really cool. Giant elephant footprints that some of them they thought were from just last night.
Yes, and they were filled with water, which was really
Mhm.
neat. And you could see where the elephant would slide. And really, I mean, we followed their tracks for quite some time. So you could tell they would use the human trails as well, which was just adorable. And I was ever
Mhm.
hopeful we would stumble upon some.
Well, we didn't get to, but
Mm-mm.
I heard that sometimes they'll block your path and it's not
Yeah.
great. So
Yes.
maybe it
Yeah.
was good that we didn't. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to run into them. But so we were all set up to go on the long, long trek. You have
Mhm.
to wear gloves, you have to wear high boots, you have to tuck in your pants to your socks.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing.
Because there are nettles and stinging plants everywhere. So even though it's hot, you have to wear gloves because you're constantly catching yourself. And in fact, they want you to use walking sticks, but most people don't. But I would say that was the first time I've ever liked walking sticks. I've never been one for those. And I know you guys opted not to. I took one,
Mhm.
and I'm glad because I would have slid a lot. So it ended up being good. But yeah, it was very impenetrable. And we were expecting everyone we talked to that had done our trail the day before said it was a solid 9-hour uphill battle to get to these, that they were stopped by elephants and they couldn't move for hours. And then we were luckily surprised within the first hour hiking uphill. Honestly, I found the hike much easier than the hunt that we did with the Hadza, even.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Stumbled upon the gorillas.
It was great. I
Yeah.
guess I wanted the more of the reward of going for 4 hours and then finding them, but, we got an hour in and we found them, and that was awesome.
Yeah.
So cool just to see them in real life. It's surprising that you can just go up to them,
Yes.
but they've kinda habituated these certain groups to be okay with humans, right?
Yeah, they're used to the humans. So even though they're wild, the park rangers only habituate some of the gorillas, meaning that they only allow humans to go up near a few of the groups. And this is one of the groups that you can. But it was really special because the silverback and his ladies had just had babies. So there were tiny baby gorillas with us on that trail that day. And we got to watch them interact and see everyone eat. And they were very relaxed, extremely relaxed, chewing on the plants.
Yeah, they kinda just posted up. It was kinda like
Yeah.
the Hadza when they're not hunting, they just post up and hang out.
Yes.
These girls are just hanging and they're just posting up. The little baby with doing little flips and having fun, just spinning around the branches, and
Yes.
it was awesome.
It
Yeah.
was incredible to get that close to such a magnificent, gentle animal.
Very once in a lifetime. But,
Yes.
so we went back. We went back after that, and we spent our first afternoon with the Batwa. So we walked with our new guide, our amazing guide Remigius. So we talked about how great Joseph was because he grew up, with the Hadza and all these other groups around him. And it's the same thing with Remigius in Uganda, as he grew up in this area. It's near the Bwindi forest and in this little village where the Batwa now have to live because they've been kicked out of the forest, which we can talk about.
Mhm.
But we walked with him, and he actually pointed out his house. Remember on the
Yes.
last day, he was like, "Oh, this is where I live." I was like, "Oh, wow, you actually live here. Like, this
I
is your
was
thing. You're
shocked.
not
He
just."
quite literally lives with the Batwa. Yeah, I was shocked by that.
Well, he was great, and he, spoke their language, spoke good English. Again, super cool to really get a great translation and really know what was going on. And so we showed up, and they greeted us with a song. A lot of these groups love to do the songs, and they told us some of their folklore. So I wanted Mary to tell us this story. It's so interesting because it mentions some of the other tribes we visited.
Yes, I think their origin story is my favorite of all the myths I've heard of all the cultures around the world, because it is really talking about the mushroom experiment, or not the mushroom, sorry, the marshmallow experiment. And also it ties in the other tribes, the Datoga, the Maasai, and all of that. So their origin story is that God created three sons. He had three sons. And with his three sons, he gave them all a big jug of fresh milk. And he didn't give them any instructions. And he left them be for the night, and then he came back the next morning. The first son drank all of the milk. That was the Batwa. And he said, you should be provided for. You don't think of the future. So I'm going to put you in a place where there's tons of food and you'll never go hungry. And so that's the Batwa. They were put into the forest where there's tons of meat and food to forage and all of that. They don't have to plant or plot or raise cattle. The second brother drank half the milk over the night and saved half. And so the creator, God, said to him, you'll be the farmers. You're going to farm the land and you'll take care of some cattle as well, but you'll grow maize and sorghum and vegetables. And to the third son didn't drink any of the milk at all. So you can see where the marshmallow experiment is coming in. And and that was the Maasai, of course. And so he said to him, you're very responsible. I'm going to give you all the riches. I'm going to give you all the animals to tend to, and you will never go hungry. So it was a really beautiful explanation of why these tribes, why these communities have such different diets, and not shaming any of them for being a planner or a non-planner, like with the Batwas, the immediate satisfaction. Yes, it was really neat. And that also is part of why many of these tribes get along, right? They have different food sources. And so it keeps them from fighting with one another. And so, yeah, I was blown away by the origin story. I don't know about you.
Absolutely. And we're talking about that classic Stanford marshmallow experiment about delayed gratification, and they give the kids, you can have one marshmallow now or, 3 marshmallows later type of thing. So,
yes.
And it was just cool because another group, was it the Maasai that had the same origin story?
Yes, the Maasai.
It actually is a common.
Yeah, the Maasai had the exact same origin story. And that's when we heard that, that's when all the pieces came together. It was really something to see that.
Well, it was cool. So then they took us into the very edge of the forest to show how they would traditionally live in the grass huts. And that's when we met all the women. And we immediately saw that there were some very old ladies there. And yeah, maybe you could just tell us about those ladies.
I definitely saw the most elderly, the largest elderly population with the Batwa. It was very incredible how old some of these ladies were, and yet they were very robust. They were doing the dances along with everyone else and jumping. And in addition to having all these elderly, there were tons of little children. And again, the temperament was just wonderful with these children. Very, they just let me pick them up. Who lets a stranger pick them up in America? The child will shriek, but these children will just go to sleep in your arms. It's incredible. So yeah, definitely far more elderly. And then you could tell the population was very fertile as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we were trying to do an interview, and there was an older woman nursing a child the entire time in the interview. And we're like, maybe we need a different camera angle. There's a breast exposed. Maybe this won't be great on film. But yeah, I mean, some of these ladies look pretty old who are still nursing, right?
Yes, that was a huge takeaway. I actually took several fake selfies so that I could politely take photos of them while they were nursing, because I felt that no one would actually believe us that people of this age were nursing and had newborn babies, basically, 6-month-olds. Some of them looked, and I didn't ask them their age, but they looked in their 50s, definitely.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It was amazing. And how long did they wean? I know you asked a lot of the groups how long, or yeah, how long do they breastfeed for?
About 2 years, 1 to 2 years.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah. And these ladies too, their dance was no joke too. This lady who was said to be 120 years old,
Yeah.
so Remedios said that, and this is what the agreed upon age was. We can't confirm it with, a birth certificate, but this was the general accepted age of this woman is 120. And their dancing is really cool. It's about stomping. So the Maasai it's about how high you can jump,
And the shoulder.
right? And the shoulders. So the women would do a lot of the shoulder work, and the men would see how high they could jump. And then the Batwa, it was about stomping, and they're known as the Pygmies, like not very large people, but they were shaking the ground
Yes.
with their stomping, and these ladies were doing it. And her daughter was 91 and was also doing the stomping and dancing.
Yes. Yeah. Her daughter, who was not the firstborn, by the way, was 91 years old. And with the Batwa, it's a bit different. You can go by their age a bit more than other communities. See, in many communities like the Maasai and many places around the world, birthdays are not celebrated and they're not recorded. But with the Batwa, they are. They do celebrate birthdays. They are recorded. And this woman had a 91-year-old daughter. She had her sister alive still as well. And she was jumping and dancing. And we saw these ladies on 3 different days. So the Gorilla Day was the first day that we saw them, and they invited me in to do a dance with them. And I was incredibly out of breath after the dance, because you're stomping and jumping and hopping as hard as you can, not light hops. And that's why the ground shakes so much. But it's a serious cardiovascular workout. And these women were just not out of breath at all. It was incredible. And on the last day, if you don't mind if I jump ahead, they did. Yeah, I think it would be very easy for anyone listening to say like, well, they did that day, but they were probably, in bed for 2 weeks in pain or something like that. But no, they did these dances every single day. And on the last day, we gave them some gifts and they did a thank you dance, and we danced with them. And then the 3 oldest ladies that we just mentioned, all not out of breath at all. In fact, I recorded them because I thought people needed to see this. And then we went up through the school, we played volleyball, and then hiked up a hill, which is a pretty significant hill up to the village. And when we got there, the 3 older women were already there, and they were laughing and having fun with each other. And yeah, so I mean, they move quickly. They're not in pain after exercising or the next day or the next day. And to be honest, I think they're in better shape than us.
I mean, I'm dead serious. I was winded and out of breath, and these ladies were not. It was crazy.
Yes.
So, and no arthritis, right?
None. No, and you could see it too. So I think we all really filmed their feet, not just when they were dancing, but when they were moving around and when they were still as well. You could see it not only in the feet, but in the other joints as well. There was just no arthritis. And I don't know many people over 50 that could dance like that, to be honest, with the arthritis rates in the States.
Yes, it was amazing. And so this woman, so she was 120. Her daughter was 91, one of her younger daughters. Then there was the grandson who looked like he was the youngest of 7.
Yes.
And he was only like 45 or something.
Mm-hmm.
He was maybe in his 40s or 50s. And then there was still 3 more generations below.
Yes.
So we have a photo of this I posted. So they had 6 generations. They weren't the direct line because they weren't all there, or I don't remember the whole situation, but we had 6 generations represented.
Yes, it was because one of the moms was out at the sister village, and so they had one of the cousins of the same generation sit in. And that's why it looked funny with the ages. But yeah, she had 6 generations. And many people were asking me after this trip, when I was telling them about this woman and her lineage that was still alive, or thriving, really, that they were asking, well, did she have children when she was like 12? When did this start? But she had 11 children throughout a lot of different ages. The daughter that's alive right now, she had when she was in her 30s. So, and she wasn't the last born, she was right in the middle. So you can see they really have a very long fertile period with the Batwa, longer than I've seen in other regions of the world. They're fertile from young ages, as everyone is, but they're also fertile late in life, which I found fascinating. And unlike the Hadza, they really do have a lot of children. So they have big clans of families.
Yeah, I guess they're pretty different from the Hadza. The Hadza seems like they didn't last as long, and they just had smaller groups, and they're more wiry. And these people were a bit different. And we should say what she ate, though. She was very proud. She told a story through Remigius about growing up in the forest. She was old enough to actually live there, and she said she got to eat meat 3 times per day.
Yes, so that's something everyone should know. The Batwa, or the Pygmies, they're part of the Pygmy group. There's many. There's about 500,000 left throughout Central Africa. But the Bwindi Pygmies were displaced in the early 90s when the national park was set up to protect the gorillas. I don't fully agree with it personally, but I don't know all the situation. So it's a good thing I'm not making legislation. But the Pygmies don't hunt gorillas. They weren't a threat to the gorillas. So, but they lived a very healthy lifestyle. And when you hear them talk, especially the ones, a lot of them were still alive when they were living in the forest in their historical ways. And like the Hadza, they're also hunter-gatherers. They're not farmers. They don't raise animals, none of those kinds of things. But such a different health profile and such a different life profile and way of living as well. They also were monogamous, just like the Hadza, but way more children. And also a lot more herbal medicine that they used. But again, just for infections, and we'll get into that. So not for chronic disease. But yeah, she really talked about growing up in the forest and how she would eat meat 3 times a day, and how she loved organ meat, and meat was her favorite food, and how that was all very normal, and how during that time it was pretty unheard of. She said point blank, it was unheard of for children to die at young ages, and it was also unheard of for anyone to die until they got very, very old, and then they would just go to sleep and pass away. So it wasn't so much of the infections and things like that you've seen seep into some of the cultures that have brought in some of the modern foods.
Yes, it was amazing. And she really echoed this kind of linear decline, right?
Yes.
And each generation, it seemed she was just like, it gets worse and worse, and people have more problems the more they go away from this natural living, scenario they used to have.
Yeah, especially with infections in particular. That seems to be what they're the most prone to now, whereas they really were not before. There were a few young children, I'd say around 2 to 3, that age range, that had big bellies, but they didn't have the malnourished faces. They were fleshy, they had lots of muscle, they had lots of flesh here, great healthy teeth. So it wasn't an issue of malnourishment for the belly, like you'll often see in commercials trying to raise money. It was parasites in the belly, and they confirmed that, and so did the local medical practitioner. But when we talked to them about that I thought was very interesting, because even though they've been out of the forest now for 30 years, which is a long time, none of the generations until this one right now, these kids under 5, have ever experienced the parasitic belly. And yet they have no clean water. They're living in the same environment. They're literally on the edge of the forest, right? The environment isn't any different. It's just their food supply is different because they're not allowed to hunt. But they were exposed to just as many parasites before as they are now. But now the children, 4 generations out of the forest, 3 generations out. I guess that would actually be more like 2 generations out of the forest. You're seeing the decline in the immune function and the inability to fight off chronic infections.
Yeah. And that's what we saw kind of universally, that the health decline It's the older generations. They lived till they died of old age. Then different infection, like disease, malaria would get them, and other diseases. And then the very youngest had the most problems. It seemed like in each group we visited,
Yes.
because they had the least. Yeah, they had to rely most on the new maize, and they didn't have the amount of animal foods.
Yes, and apparently an enormous portion of their population died when they were forced out of the forest. Some of that from people going back into the forest, and that still happens today. There are soldiers within the forest guarding the forest, and if anyone goes in there without a permit, you get shot. But a lot of them miss their old lifestyle, and so they'll go back in, and then they're never seen again.
Wow, yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Hopefully maybe they find a little group and manage to
I hope so.
escape getting shot, and they're never seen again because they live in a magical.
I hope so too.
We'll hope that.
Yes.
They made traps, so they weren't just shooting arrows like the Hadza as their main way. I mean, who knows what their main way of catching animals was, but they showed us how to make their traps, which were really cool.
Yes, and that's a common thread you'll see through other pygmy communities as well. So they're not working really hard for their food, not in the same way as the Hadza. They set a trap and then they go and get it. And they can hear when the animal's crying if it hasn't been killed, and they go and slaughter the animal, and then they have a feast. And you'll see that in regions of the Congo and other countries as well.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was for wild pigs. So when they showed us, and it had all those little spring mechanism and all this whole thing going on, and it catches the leg and it holds it in this little trap. It was great. They also said, so she said, the 120-year-old woman said, I went from eating meat 3 times a day to now sometimes we only get meat on Easter and Christmas.
Yes.
The whole year they'll only get it. And I'm guessing they get, milk and eggs other times, because we saw that. So they weren't, really screwed, but they could only actually afford meat twice a year.
I was blown away by their health profile despite that. Obviously you see I think the Batwa were the perfect example of all the places we went of the generational decline when you get away from an ancestral diet. But I was very much impressed that people were surviving on the food that they were eating. And yeah, they get milk maybe once to twice a week, so it's not every day. And then they get some eggs. There's chickens running around, and on holidays they'll slaughter a pig or a goat or a cow, something like that. But that's 2 holidays a year. So yeah, it was really quite sad to hear her story.
Well, yeah. So that's another reason why we're doing the Cows for Kids. It's like we can get this community, and they know how to care for animals, and they wish they had more animals. They just can't afford them.
Yes. Yeah. And they don't, most of these communities, and this is something that I think is so misunderstood about many places in Africa and the rest of the world as well. They don't function with money. They're not a financial system. It's a communal system. So if you give them a bag of salt, they're immediately sharing it with others, or if you give them anything else. And so they're not in the mindset of earning, and they honestly don't have a way of earning, because one thing that many of the Batwa said that they wish that they could do was to be guides for the gorillas. They know the forest, and all of that, and they can show people the medicinal plants and how they used to live. But the government has all of these regulations over schools that you have to attend and graduate from. And although the Ugandan government provides schools, they build the walls of the school. They don't pay for the teachers. They don't pay for the students. And so here you've got this community that had never used money in their life. They have no way of really making money. They're kind of squatting on land now and trying to survive. And so they have to really shift their whole culture to figure out how to kind of get by and get their kids in school so that they can have jobs. But it's pretty prohibitive for them to work for most of the jobs in that region.
Yeah, the only jobs we saw were crushing rocks by hand into gravel. It was crazy. That's what they do. And you get, I don't know, like $1 a month, something crazy in our money, to just by hand crush rocks into gravel that they can use to make, cement and other stuff.
Yeah, and you'll see whole families doing that. The very young children on the side of the road doing it with their mothers.
It's crazy. And then the only other way I saw it was they weave nice little baskets and different things. And so we bought some of them to support them. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's not a lot of ways to make money out there.
No, there's not, and it's really a shame because they're a very lively bunch. All of the presentations they gave and all of the things that we did with them, they were at 200%. They were they're really not lazy. They're very fun, and they'd be wonderful actors and really good at all sorts of things. But yeah, they're in a bit of a pickle. They definitely need help with procuring food. The nice thing about the animals, if they attain animals, is that animals have babies, and so it's a wellspring of food, which is really nice.
Yeah, self-sustaining. I mean, it's so sad that this idea of to help people is just send them sacks of grain.
Yes.
It's the worst thing you can do.
Yes.
There's no nutrition, and then they just have to rely on the grain instead of giving them an animal that can multiply and they can actually take care of it and make it sustainable.
Yeah, especially in that environment, because the water is brown. And it has diphtheria and all sorts of stuff in there. When we went to, we should talk about this. When we went to the on-site nurse, her apothecary, so to speak, I filmed all of the medicines in there because it wasn't any of the things you'd see in an American or a European apothecary or pharmacy. It was all antimicrobials and almost all parasitic. So it was about 80% anti-parasites, and then as one antibiotic, but that's not as common of an issue there in the bacteria, and a few antivirals. And that was pretty much it, along with stomach acid medication, which makes sense. She said they can get hernias in that area quite a bit, but hernias are caused typically by H. pylori parasite. So that makes sense too. So really more parasites than anything else. And they don't have access to clean water. They know that they're supposed to boil it, but it's very difficult to haul water from a very long way and then go through the process of boiling when you're thirsty, when you're in a hot equatorial area.
Yeah. So again, they didn't have the modern things that we have, these modern ailments that we all deal with. They had problems with, bacteria because their water is no good. I mean, it was crazy. Even with their meager diets and, trying to scrape together enough milk and eggs, but it was based on whole foods, and they were still doing okay.
Yeah, the fertility in particular, I know I keep circling back to that, but that you can really see a health of a society with that. And the women were so fertile. They had never had period pain. They had never had an irregular cycle. They had never heard of someone not being able to get pregnant or a child being born and not being able to latch. They don't get tongue ties, and they don't require herbs to get the mother to produce milk. These things are all common issues worldwide, and they've never seen them before. It's really eye-opening.
Yeah, and people had questions about their height too. And the older people were shorter, but they're mixing in with, I think, the other tribe in the area is called the Kiga.
Yes.
And they were mixing in with the Kiga, which were, normal height. So this Remigius told us that, yes, they are getting taller.
Yes, and it was neat because he stood in a line. We'll have to get that picture in here with him, and everyone was staged by age, and you could see them just getting taller in each generation. Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool.
It was.
So what else? We had the politics are interesting too. That kind of crept into our trip.
Well, very much so, because I wasn't planning to come to Cape Town, as you know. I was planning on staying in Uganda for a full month and going to see there's some other communities up in the northeast of Uganda that are very similar to the Maasai. They live on blood and milk and meat, but they're not talked about. Not many people know about them, and they're in a difficult region to get to politically because it's right over the border. There's a civil war going on, and so it's dangerous. There's carjackings and all of that. So it's understandable that a lot of people haven't gone, but we were planning to go, and yeah, it all got canceled because Museveni, who is the president and has been the president of Uganda for 30 years, was reelected 3 weeks before a trip. And usually Uganda is known for excellent internet, which is part of why I was going to have such a long trip there, because then I could work during the week and do community visits on the weekend. But as you and I experienced, the internet was rarely working at all. And our wonderful guide, Richard, who ended up becoming a great friend, and we've all been texting with him each day since then, because he's on a weight loss journey now. But he was joking about how, yes, the internet will be out until Museveni is sworn in. And I personally kept thinking, oh, well, that'll happen any day now because, the election was a few weeks ago. But no, on the drive back, going back into Entebbe after a trip, he casually mentioned that wouldn't happen until May. And so I suddenly realized, I have to get somewhere with internet by Monday. So real serious political issues going on there. You see a lot of armed militia. You see them in troops going places. You see them on the side of the road pulling lots of people over for kind of bogus tickets. And we fell into that too. We got pulled over and detained, which wasn't fun.
Yeah. On our way home, we were trying to get back and get our COVID tests and get out of there. And it was getting scary. We got shaken down.
Yes, there was a shakedown.
Well, we got a proper shakedown. We were stuck in our van for over an hour in the hot sun right next to this little jail. And these guys just made up. They said, hey, you didn't stop at you blew through the last checkpoint. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then they took our driver, Richard, away and shook him down. Luckily, they didn't shake us down. We were hiding all our footage, hiding our money. But we were emailing the embassy.
Yes.
We tried to get the word out where we were. But yeah, it's a bit dicey over there.
It's very dicey, and it's very cowboy in that lots of things can happen and they're fully out of your control. So yeah, I was worried. I was full on messaging the embassy as soon as possible, because when they took Richard away, they also got in the car and moved us off the main road, which is never a good thing in Uganda. And then he was just gone for a really long time. And we had no idea when he was coming back, if he was coming back, if we were just sitting ducks, what was going to happen next. And yeah, we ended up being very lucky, but thanks to Richard.
Yeah, he ended up having to pay something, but I don't know if he's trying to get the money back through a procedure and wrote a statement. So we'll see what happens there. But
yes,
yeah, it was intense and kind of held us up. And we went back to Kampala, which is the main city, which kind of was a nightmare.
Yes.
Kampala it was Friday afternoon, but yeah, he was joking around that we think we know what traffic is. And I was telling him I live in LA. And he's like, okay, you'll see some traffic.
And I thought that we would be laughing at the end. And no, he was the one laughing, because Kampala traffic, I will never go to Kampala again, personally.
Oh, yeah. Never again. There's no reason to go there.
Just make the t-shirts.
Never again. So it took us 4 hours just to go to Kampala and get the COVID test, which we could have just bypassed it, went straight to Entebbe and had a pleasant evening at our little, whatever our hostel was. Yeah.
Yes. And meanwhile, it's stressful. So in most of Uganda, theft is not much of a thing, because they have this kind of brutal consequence, I guess you would say. If you get caught stealing in a village, it's very common to have a procedure called a necklace put on you, which is where, do you want me to say this on air?
Yeah.
Okay. So a necklace in Uganda, this is also a practice in South Africa too, but Uganda, it's probably the most common. It happens quite frequently, unfortunately. But if someone is caught stealing, let's say it's a man, he's caught stealing, the first time he'll be warned. And so they hang the item around his neck that he was caught stealing. And then they send him around the village to kind of walk the gauntlet and get beaten, essentially. So shamed and beaten. If it happens again, then they do the necklace, which is where they put a tire over the head, they fill it with gasoline and then light it on fire. And it's brutal. It takes 20 minutes to die. It's not a pleasant death. And it happens, Richard was saying, weekly. It happens very frequently. So it's really a problem. And it was scary to learn that if the woman is caught cheating, or not cheating, stealing. So let's say there's a woman, she's married to a man and she's caught stealing. It's the man who gets punished, because it's seen as his inability to provide that caused the issue. So yeah, very, very serious punishment in Uganda. It's no joke. And of course, many people know Uganda's political history, especially, from the very famous movie, The King of Scotland. But things are still a bit rough there, and there's so many political prisoners. Anytime there's an election, many people are murdered or put in jail that are opposing Museveni so that he can just win again.
Yeah,
Yes.
quote. If you aren't watching the video version, we're air quoting here.
Yes.
So what she's saying is it's pretty intense punishment, but in the cities, they're so desperate and they go around in these packs of, I guess, like kind of 20-year-old males would just roam around and steal things out of your car. So we saw this happen right in front of us. I couldn't believe it. Richard was so relaxed about it. But he's like, hey, we were stuck in this certain traffic jam, did not move. And we were there, it was a full hour just sitting on one road. It was insane. And right in front of us, it just started getting dark. And they just reached into the car, grabbed the phone and just bounced out so quickly.
It was incredible because we all knew about this practice in the villages. And so you would think that there's no theft, but in Kampala, it's totally different. There's tons of theft. In fact, you can't even have your phone out in a car with the windows closed and the door locked because they'll break in. And if you try to fight them, they're very ready to hurt you. And there's a lot of them. So it's very dangerous. So yeah, I didn't feel threatened at all when we were in the villages or anywhere else. I never felt that I wasn't safe. I don't think I ever was not safe. But in the city, I definitely felt very unsafe.
Well, it was crazy. So yeah, we put our phones away, but I got this machete from the Batwa. They gave it to me. So I got it back to the US, which is awesome. But so, yeah, we were sitting in this van I had the machete in my hand and we were ready.
That was the one thing that made me feel safe because I knew you had your machete at the ready and you were right behind me if anything went down. Yeah, so I was very grateful for you that day.
I was ready. If hands came in, they may have been gone. So we made it through that. And maybe should we backtrack a little just to recap? We don't need to go on forever, but what else can we say about the general health of Batwa, how it's changed? Any other questions we had from the listeners?
So I found, before we go into the questions, I found it really remarkable that here's another hunter-gatherer society, right? There's not a lot of these left. And we got to see two groups, or really three, on this trip. So the Batwa, they're hunter-gatherers, and yet I found their health to be far greater than the Hadza. Again, they lived longer. They had way more elderly people as well. Of course, we had a small sampling in Tanzania, so that's not a conclusive statement. But I was really blown away by their vivacity. They had so much life in them. And I was really looking for health issues. With them, I didn't see even minor things. I didn't see toenail fungus or anything like that. The one thing I saw, aside from the parasite bellies in a couple of the children, was one woman who was nursing had some hair growth here on her chin, just one patch. That's typically a sign of insulin issues. That's a sign of PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And it can also be caused by anything that drives up androgen levels in the body, which is a male hormone that can cause hair growth for women. But that was it. And she was thin and she was fertile. So she was nursing a new baby. So whatever she had wasn't serious. But that was really the only thing that I could see with my eye. And when we talked to the nurse, it seemed mainly infections to be an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's some questions about food and whether they eat seeds and leaves and all this type of stuff. And I was kind of like recounting what we saw them eat. Mm-hmm. And other than the Hadza women, some of them were making some pumpkin leaves. We didn't see a lot of leafy greens. Mm-hmm. It was mostly starchy foods, right?
Yeah, mostly starchy. And that was interesting because here they are in a rainforest. You can very easily grow greens in that region. They were growing cabbage. They had some greens growing, but we didn't see anyone eat them. They did talk about, in fact, they showed us a lot of their herbal medicine, and they really do use a whole plethora of plants for medicine, but they're mainly for infections. They're not for anything chronic like arthritis or IBS or autoimmunity immunity or any of these kind of things. So it's just for an immediate issue like a headache, a bellyache. That's what those herbs were for. But yeah, mostly starches. So they also had the cassava, they had the taro, they had the green banana. They were growing some regular potato, although many of these regions call up all potatoes potato. So you have to really suss out if things are sweet potatoes or regular potatoes, because there's often one word for all of those plants. And that was true for this region too. They had beans, although beans and again grains were never a part of their diet until 30 years ago.
Yeah, they were cooking a big pot of beans and the cassava, I think, or they had Irish potatoes. They called them Irish potatoes, right? So they knew, at least sometimes I remember seeing them in the market, or that they were different. But yeah, they had to cook like a big old pot of beans with, I don't know what else was in it, but that's what they had to rely on sometimes.
Yes. And one of the ladies, it was very interesting, was peeling a bunch of cassava and then cooking cassava to give to the pigs, which I thought was really interesting. She found that when she gave it raw, that the pigs would get sick.
Interesting. And then maybe we could talk about the city. So in the market, we're going to have one last episode on the remaining groups we visited and sort of the transition to city life. But maybe we could put in here about you, because it was in Uganda that we saw this transition. So it kind of relates to the Batwa, how, they had their old life in the forest, eating natural foods. And they were actually very proud. I remember them saying like natural foods. They were very proud of like non-pesticides, non-monocrops, not that they have like tons of that stuff there anyway, but they were talking about it wasn't grown in a crops. It's like we got natural foods from the forest, and now we don't have those anymore.
Yes. Yeah. They really had a beautiful diet before they were forced out of the forest, and they've gotten by, but it's really difficult for them. They're used to hunting, and you're not allowed to hunt there at all. Even if game comes from the forest onto the land, you're still not allowed to kill that. In fact, someone had just gotten in trouble for that the week prior.
I remember them saying that, but at least they could keep a pig. I guess you have to buy a pig. Instead of getting a wild pig, they had, a regular pig, and then they had to feed it and take care of it. Okay, so the transition to the city life, though, this was interesting to me because we spent the last day just in Entebbe. We kind of just saw the market, went to a few different locations, check out the scenes, see what how their health was. And so the city people were pretty healthy. Like in their up until 45, everyone was kind of lean and they looked okay. And they had chicken stands and they had a pretty good diet. They didn't have fast food at all. I didn't see anyone drinking soda or snacks or treats. We went to the whole market. No one was eating these. Any market I've ever been to in the world, not only is everyone snacking and eating on the treats, but that's like half the stands. Half the stands are, get your treats, get this, get your sweets. They did not have that.
Yes. Yeah, not at all. In fact, we asked person after person after person, what's your favorite food? And do you eat dessert? And none of them eat dessert. Not a single one, not ever. Often not even on birthdays. Dessert is just not a thing.
Not a thing. Yeah. And then, yes, there was some sugar and sodas in certain stores. You could find it, but you didn't see it. People were not eating it. I don't think they can afford it. No. When you walk around this market, and I saw what they're eating, there's many ladies. Okay, well, here's my point. Up until they're 45, they stay in shape. It seems that everyone looks okay. And then not anyone, but very many people, once they hit a certain age, very big women. Yeah. These women just were gigantic, like American size, like novelty, obese women sitting in the market and just eating their bananas and porridge. But the thing is, they had the cooking oils.
Yeah.
They had the oils move in.
Yeah.
And so you see these bottles, they put them in Gatorade bottles, they put them in water bottles. They make their chapati as their kind of tortilla, or like what's the Greek one? It's like a pita. Yeah, like a pita bread kind of thing. And they just dump this oil and this mystery oil, the seed oils on this bread. They start cooking with it. Their doctors are trying to tell people to not use animal fat and to use the cooking oils. And I think what is happening is it catches up to you later. Maybe you can tell me what you think, but why it didn't seem to happen until you're 45. People seemed fit, but I don't know. After that, there was some bellies. The men too, there wasn't that many men over 45 out in the public. I don't know if they're just hanging out. It seems like they just post stuff at home and then they have the women do the work. But there's young men and women everywhere. But they were all in shape until you got to 45.
Yes. So they also didn't have the chronic disease until they were in the midlife. And then at the midlife, then it would be kind of a wellspring of illness would set in, especially things that were more common to see back in the America in the 60s and 70s when we were kind of going through this phase that I think Uganda is now going through. And that is that the vegetable oils have come in, they've replaced some of their starches, and that alone, without adding in dessert, without adding in fast food and potato chips and snacks and eating 6 times a day and all those things that we've done in the States, without adding all of that in, they've got the obesity, they're getting the diabetes around like 50, 60, that's setting in, and they're getting all the kind of typical health conditions that we would expect from the States in 1960 and 70. And so I think we can really see this with a timestamp. When these foods come in, the population can usually tolerate maybe one thing being brought in, right? A lot of parts of Africa, corn was brought in about 100 years ago, and they did okay, right? They're kind of okay until they're about 90, but that's with nothing else changing. So then they'll get some illness. They may not die of old age. Maybe they'll get diabetes at 90 and then have health complications after that, but they're healthy until that if just the corn has come in and nothing else. But then you bring in vegetable oil, there's a huge problem because very similar to what I saw in the villages in Zanzibar, is that those are the two things that have been brought in. It's like the corn and the vegetable oil, but the amount of oil that is used in these traditional diets, right? We often forget, or many people don't even know, although I think the audience will, that traditional diets are typically extremely high in fat. And so if you change that caloric intake with something that doesn't match our own fat cells, that can't repair our immune system, that interferes with signaling, like the omega-6 fatty acids can in abundance, you start to get real serious problems. And I think we're going to see more of the generational decline with this vegetable oil in there because the women were just not healthy. They were all eating constantly. They were hungry. Right. So that shows us that their blood sugar is off and they're eating this kind of slop and they're just incredibly obese.
It's sad, and it's kind of a window into the past and a window into that transition. And this is what Weston Price saw, and this is what we've been talking about forever and ever, is you have your traditional diets, everyone's healthy. You start getting in some of these foods. It's not like rampant McDonald's came in where, all that happened is you get some maize flour, you get some seed oils, and you can really see it go downhill quickly. And then you can see the writing on the wall is once they get more of these sweets, treats, all this type of stuff, more of the processed foods come in, 30 years from now, they're going to be like the US and it's going to be a nightmare.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it's sad. I don't know what we can do about it other than warn people about, these things, which people already know about listening. And, anything else with Uganda? Because we can move on to the next podcast and do our final show if there's nothing else.
There's so much I want to say, but I want to say it in contrast to the other tribes and talk about Richard and all of that. So I think let's save it. But I will say on a happy note, what you're saying, I think so often really good things come out of something really bad happening. And what's happening to the health in the States is awful. And what you and I are working at on a daily basis, right? We're in the trenches, helping people reverse their conditions and empower people to heal themselves. And it's a lot of work. And that work personally always really satisfied me. I've always been very happy at the end of the day. But I've had a completely different experience after this trip, being back at work and seeing the contrast of health. I had 3 new clients this week, in addition to my normal client load. And each one came in having been sick for decades with a laundry list of medications and a laundry list of supplements and all of these symptoms. They haven't felt well, maybe ever. And the contrast of that to these old women in the Batwa who are jumping 2 feet off the ground at, 91, 103, and 120 is startling. It's really startling. And I think we can take our knowledge from what we've seen in America, what we've seen in Europe and in the rest of the world, and help these communities maintain their knowledge, maintain their wisdom, and not fall into the traps that we have. So hopefully, we can do that. And I think then it's not such a sad story.
Absolutely. Great way to end this. We'll link people to Mary, enableyourhealing.com. You can try to get on our waiting list. But I really want to talk about Cows for Kids. Yeah. We should have it up by now, cowsforkids.com, cowsforkids.org. I guess we have both the domains. We're going to get an Indiegogo together. We're putting in our own money. This is not a for-profit venture. We'll put in our own money, but we're also looking for other people to support as well.
Yes, we initially were just going to sponsor these places. And what we're doing, so we're going to sponsor small villages where they're still eating their traditional diet, except for where the schools have come in and started to feed them corn and maize. And so what we're going to do is provide the animals so that the kids at school can eat their traditional ancestral diet. And therefore, they don't end up with the health issues that we're seeing in the cities, that we're seeing in the West, and help maintain this kind of wellspring of health. Right? Everyone's always looking for a fountain of youth, but really what we want is health. And these communities have it and they can maintain it, but not if what happens to them or what has happened to the rest of the world happens to them. So our goal, Brian and I, we're in Jay as well. We're all going to be working really hard. We're putting our own money into this. And basically, we just want to provide these communities with a sustainable way to feed their children. And the beauty about it is what we mentioned earlier. It's self-sustaining. Once you have the animals in each village, they have babies, they take care of themselves. And these are communities that already take care of animals. So no one needs to be trained on what to do. There's people to do it. It's a real live action way we can stop illness rather than just turning it around.
It's so simple. It's instead of having the ugali porridge of just water and maize, you have the water, maize, and milk, and it turns into something that can actually allow a child to grow and thrive. So
or in the chaga, we give them the sorghum and the meat and the milk and the eggs, or with the Maasai, they'll get the milk. And and with each community, it'll be different based on their ancestral diet, but they'll get some of the
goat. We could give them a goat. Yeah, it doesn't always have to be a cow.
Yes.
We give them a goat or a chicken. So we're going to have different levels on the Indiegogo. It's like the cow is a few $100, the goat, whatever it is, and the chicken. And we'll just try to get the community involved in this and see where it goes.
Yes. Yeah, I think it'll be powerful. One of my friends, Heather, lives in Zambia. I've told you about her. We've got to go see her together one day. But she lives in a vegetarian community in Zambia, and they went through a horrific famine last year because of the political issues, not from lack of food. It was political hijacking of food. And so, I was sending cows there, and it was great because then they had milk, and we would send chickens, and they would have eggs, and it was fantastic. So we'll be able to do this on a global scale, hopefully around the world if this takes off.
Yeah, that's great. Mary already has experience doing this. And so we're just going to try to do this at a bigger scale. And cowsforkids.org. That's with a 4. It's the number 4. We're going to try to get the other domains too, so we can, catch everyone. All right. Thanks so much, Mary. Let's come back for round 4.
Sounds great.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for sharing with a friend, leaving a review on iTunes or the Apple Podcast app. Go to nosetotale.org for all the meats, the seasonings, the skincare, all animal-based, regenerative, sustainable, great stuff, free shipping options. Cows for Kids, cows, the number 4 kids.com. you can click through to the Indiegogo page there, where all the money will go along with our money to go to buying the animals for the communities we visited. Mary is spearheading this, and she's so awesome. She's still in Africa, and she's eager to make this happen, as am I. Cows4kids.com and sapien.org. You can find out about everything there. The program, book something with Dr. Gary, join the tribe, and we'll see you soon for the last episode in our series with Mary.